Hi everyone, it's Lisette. Welcome to my Proverbs Home Kitchen. I am actually in my kitchen right now stirring up some Jiffy corn muffin mix, that good old fashioned Jiffy corn muffin mix. How many of you remember Jiffy corn muffin? I still use it. I remember my mom using Jiffy corn muffin mix. Hi mom, if you're listening. And I just still love using it. I use it all the time. I add my own, whatever I want to add to it, and I just really like it. But I'm over here pouring the mix into some cupcake holders, feeling the breeze coming from outside, just breezing through my kitchen, and I'm looking at each one, how different it is as I pour it. I know that's kind of funny, but just thinking about that. Each corn muffin is going to have like a different shape to it. But these are absolutely delicious. I like adding my own vanilla, like real vanilla, not the imitation stuff. I like adding that to my muffins, and they just come out so delicious. And these are great with chili. They're great with anything that you make. But as I was pouring this mix inside the muffin holders, and they're like vintage muffin holders. The paper is like a light brown. It looks very like antique, and it's just so pretty. I actually got them at the Amish shop, and I really like them. They look really pretty. So when these are done, they're going to look really nice, and I'll be very happy to take them over to my friend's house. I was thinking today, yes, I was. You know how sometimes you're doing things in your kitchen or you're cleaning, and that's when you get into deep thought about your life. You get into deep thought about certain things. And I was thinking today about carbon copies. Now, remember the carbon copies for those of you who are my age, I'm not going to tell you, but us older folks. Remember the carbon copies from years ago in the office where if you wrote out a receipt, or you wrote something, it had like an ink copy under it, and then it would make a copy onto the other page. Remember those? Well, I was thinking about that. I remember sometimes when I worked in an office, I worked for a phone company many years ago. I think I was right out of high school when I worked for this company. And we used to have to write on those. We used to have to write either receipts. And I remember I used to mess them up sometimes because I wouldn't put the carbon copy, the ink one, under the correct way. And it would cross over on whatever else I wrote. And then I would have to start over. So I was thinking about that today, about carbon copies. And that brought me to this. We shouldn't be anyone's carbon copy. And what I mean by that, we're all different. Now, some of us may have the same calling. Some of us may be teachers. Some of us may be, pastors. Some of us may be homemakers. Some of us work out of the field. That we may work as nurses. Different things that we do. But regardless of that, we're all different. And I wanted to tell you today, don't be anyone's carbon copy. Be who you're supposed to be. Because you see, when you write on carbon copies, and if you don't put that ink paper in right, that's what I call it, because it was like that purplish ink, and if you touched it, you got ink all over your fingers. Remember those? You end up overlapping, or you end up having to start over again. And when we're trying to be like someone else, guess what? We end up overlapping and starting over because it's not what God's called us to do. Do what God has called you to do. It's great. It's great to admire others and learn from others. That's a great thing. It's great to have those people that we look up to. We all have those, right? Most of all, we're to look up to God, because guess what? People are going to mess up. They're going to fail us. That's big on YouTube. On YouTube, and all of you who are content creators that are listening to this, if you make one mistake, you say something you didn't mean, or whatever, you didn't write, you didn't wear the right color, didn't say the right thing, you didn't open your gift the way you should have, you didn't look a certain way, you're always going to have somebody that's not going to like it, right? So we all know that. We all know that from being content creators and being on here, that somebody can love you the first time, but as soon as you mess up, they're gone. And we all have probably been there in our personal lives. Okay? Because we know that those good friends that are there through the good and the bad, they're far and few between, right? And we need to thank God for those friends. Right now, I'm actually washing a pot. You know, I had a pot on a Pioneer Woman. It's like a Dutch pot. I think that's what it's called, a deep Dutch pot or something like that. I don't know. But I'm actually washing this pot right now. It's really pretty. Because I left it, I had made potatoes, boiled some potatoes, and I left the water in there and forgot to wash it. And then when I went to use it today and I lifted up the lid, there was water in there with bubbles. I'm like, oh, this needs to be washed. So I put it in the sink and I'm scrubbing it now. I've got my muffins sitting for a little bit, then I'm going to put them in the oven. So, you know, when we're trying to be like someone else, try to copy them, try to be like them, like I said, we can admire them and copy the things that are good. Therefore, if you have never been a homesteader and you're trying to learn how to be a homesteader, you've never been a homemaker and you're trying to learn, you just want a different life, you want to live more frugally, we want to watch those who we're going to learn from. Those are the people we want to watch. The people that God uses to teach us. And we want to follow their example, but what we don't want to do is try to be exactly like them. Be a carbon copy of who they are, where we're missing our own individuality. So if I'm learning something, if you're learning something, it's okay to learn to do it the right way, but it's also okay to give it your special touch. And sometimes we become people pleasers. We want to please everyone, and then we're really hurt when they mess up or they don't receive us the way we think they should receive us. I have been there. I have done that. When I was too afraid to be myself, be who God called me to be. Not to try to be like someone else, not to try to dress like someone else or look like someone else, but just be myself. I'm washing some dishes right now. Gotta wash the spoon. So we gotta learn to be ourselves. Not to be like anyone else or try to be like someone else. You know, I don't know if many of you know who Joyce Myers is. I'm sure some of you know who she is. And I remember she was telling this story. I think I shared this with you before, but I don't remember. So I'm going to share it again. And she was telling a story about her neighbor, how her neighbor had this fur coat and her neighbor just was the perfect soft-spoken lady that she thought was perfect. And she just wanted what her neighbor had. And she saw her neighbor's garden. Her neighbor had this really nice garden with tomatoes and everything. And she wanted the same thing. Well, she decided to start growing a garden of tomatoes. To make a long story short, a bunch of bugs came and ate all her tomatoes. And she was really upset about her tomatoes being eaten by all these bugs. And she said, why did this happen to me? And God spoke to her and said, because I didn't call you to grow tomatoes. Now, it's not saying you can't grow tomatoes if your neighbor's growing tomatoes. It's just a metaphor. But what it is saying, that you should be yourself and not try to be like someone else. Because when you learn to accept who God has created you to be, when you learn to say, I am created in the image of God, He had a plan for me from the day I was in my mother's womb. The Bible says He knitted you together. He put you together. He had a plan separate from everyone else's plan. When we start doing that, we stop envying others. We stop wanting to be like others. We stop being jealous. Because we know that God's plan for our life and their life is two different plans. And that what God has for us to do is special. You know, who are we being a carbon copy of? Who are we being a carbon copy of? Or are we just being who God created us to be? Now, sometimes we may have the same mannerisms or may look like someone. And maybe, you know, our mannerisms are the same. There's nothing wrong with that. I've met people that I'm like, wow, you remind me of so-and-so. Right? That happens. That's okay. But not to the degree. Not to the degree when we're trying to be exactly like them and we want everything they have. God doesn't want us to be a carbon copy of no one Now, I would tell you, I would love to be a homesteader. I would love to have some chickens and lambs. Now, we do grow our own food, but I would love to be a homesteader. This year wasn't the best, to be honest with you. As far as growing food, it just wasn't the best. Because we had so much rain. But you know what? I can't have chickens right now. It's not something that is going to be feasible for my husband and I at this point in our lives. Maybe one day we will. But right now, God has something else for us to do that is just as important. God has something else for us to do in our lives, and that's reaching people in the community, doing something different. You know, we think sometimes that all our problems are going to go away and that God just brings us peace to take all our problems away. Sometimes he uses us in the midst of the problems we're going through. I remember when I was going through cancer and I was sitting in the oncology room and we were all sitting in a circle and waiting for our infusion. And I remember those were some deep times when I was able to speak to people. Those were some deep times in my life that I was going through a struggle and I was hurting, I was going through cancer, but I was able to witness and share Christ with others. That's when I started a Bible ministry. It's when I was going through chemo. One day I was home, I was by myself, and God spoke to my heart and said, I want you to go on ahead and I want you to share Bibles with others and start a Bible ministry. And I just thought to myself, a Bible ministry? Like, that wasn't in my mind. I never thought about doing anything like that. So I kind of just kept it to myself. I didn't share with anybody. And one day I was sitting at church and a gentleman came over during a mission service, and he came over to me. He goes, I want to let you know there's Bibles in the office. If you want any Bibles, you can take them and you can give them out. Well, guess what? I knew God was speaking to me because I never told anyone. Pass out Bibles wherever I went. At the laundromat, in my car, I had them. Then I got children's Bibles and crayons and stuff for children. I started going to sales and people were giving out free Bibles for me. And I knew God was touching me. That was God. It was a different ministry. He used me in the midst of my pain. You know, why didn't he use me when I was doing great and I was happy and I wasn't sick? He used me while I was sick because I think sometimes through the problems is when he gets our attention. When we're struggling with things is when he gets our attention. It's not always the easy path. Sometimes he wants to walk us through the hard paths so we can grow and we can learn. We're not always meant to just have it easy and never learn and never grow. We're all going to have our troubles. Right here on my table, I'm looking at the zucchinis a friend of mine gave me. Hi, Debbie, if you're listening, thank you for the beautiful zucchinis. And I'm looking at them, and they're all different shapes. Different shapes and sizes. But they're all good, and they're all going to make zucchini bread, zucchini cookies, whatever I want to make. Fried zucchini fries, you know. They're all going to do something different. We're going to use them for something different. But they're still going to be used. You're not anyone's carbon copy. Stop looking at your sister, and I'm talking about friend or sister in Christ, or, you know, if you're not a Christian, your neighbor. And if you're not a Christian, I tell you all the love in my heart, why don't you try Jesus? Why don't you turn to him and see your life change in an amazing way? You know, carbon copies are just for the office. That's what they're for. We're not meant to be carbon copies. We're meant to be who God created us to be. Let's say you're someone that sews. My grandmother, my mom, all of them were seamstress. They all sewed. My grandmother sewed wedding dresses and made gowns. My other grandmother, and these are women, she owned restaurants, and her and my grandfather were pastors. God used them all in different ways, all the women in my family. Have we had our hard times? Times where we've cried? Sure. Sure we had hard times. But God used them. My mom keeps telling me, you can sew, you can do it. I don't think that's my calling. But I'm going to try. Definitely going to try. I was thinking of making some lavender pillows. Some small lavender pillows. I think that would be so much fun. Getting out that sewing machine and just making some lavender pillows. My lavender did great this year. It's grown so beautiful. It's absolutely amazing. Be who you are called to be. Not anyone else. We're going to go through trials. We're going to go through struggles. There's different things. Maybe you have a neighbor that's doing great and you see everything so peaceful and they have everything and you feel like, oh, I want to be like that. But God didn't call you to be like your neighbor. He called you to be you. Yes, everything may be going great for them for a while, but I guarantee they've had their trials. They've had the things that they've gone through. Maybe you want to be a homesteader and you're like, oh, I want to be just like that. And that's great. If you can do it and be a homesteader, go for it. But if God is telling you to wait, He's got something else for you to do, just be patient and wait in the Lord. He will guide you when it's your time. But, learn all you can learn. Learn. Be a homesteader living in an apartment. Who says you can't? Get some fish. If you can't have dogs or cats. Get some fish. Learn how to cook from scratch. Do many different things, If you're a homeschooler, bring it into your home. Bring nature into your home. Sometimes we fixate on others, but we don't know what they've been through. And remember, YouTube is one of those places where you can watch people and you could think, oh, they got it all together. They're on camera. Oh, they're always smiling. Well, I guarantee you they have some stories to share with you. I guarantee you they got some things to tell you that they've been through that you would be like, oh, I don't know if I want to go through that to have what they have. They've been through some struggles. They've lost it all. They've had to work the ground. They have had to work hard. There's been some women out there, maybe lost children, never had children. And now they're foster parents. And you're saying, I want to be a foster parent. But once you get those kids in your house, you're like, oh, I don't want to do this. But they can do it so well because it is a calling on their life. Remember, the gift you have, whether it's sewing things, whether it's cooking. I was watching a video the other day and the lady was cooking at her stove. And I'm just watching her making all these meals. And I'm thinking to myself, what a gift. How many women would sit at a stove and sit there and cook for so many people and make these big meals, make 3 or 4 meals at one time? I know that's not my gifting. I can make muffins and I can throw an apple pie in the oven and cook one big meal, but 4 different kind of meals, that's something I have to master. But some people are so gifted at that. I watch some families, some homesteaders, homeschoolers, and I'm like, wow, they're so gifted. I have a friend, she knows who she is, and she has a homesteading channel, and I watch her channel, and she always has everything so nice. Her pantry looks perfect. I'm like, I wish you were my neighbor. I would have you come over and help me get my pantry together. But you see, God didn't call me to do all that right now. He called me to learn about it because one day I probably will be doing that. He called me to learn how to do these different things, how to be a homemaker, how to be a housewife, how to work outside, but still put my home first, how to dehydrate things. That's what he called me to do. But he called me to be a pastor's wife right now. It's not easy. It's going to be different people in my life. Some people will love us. Some people will hate us. That's just part of ministry. He called me to support my husband, to love him, to be a homemaker, to be a housewife. I'm doing it bits by bits. I'm learning different things. But I cannot try to be like someone else completely and just say I want to be like them. Because that would be wrong, and I would be very disappointed when I find out I'm not them. Be who God's called you to be. Leave the carbon copies in the office, in the machine. Be the beautiful woman that God has called you to be. Whether you have a little bit, you have a lot, use what you have. There's another channel, and the slogan on that channel is make it make. Make it make. And I agree. Every time I hear that slogan, make it make, I'm like, oh yeah, Gotta make it happen with what God has given you. If you're trying to compare yourself to that woman on the magazine, or you're trying to say, I wish I was more beautiful, I wish I was less, I wish I was more healthy, or I was skinnier. That pain in our life is what tells us apart. And don't be anyone's carbon copy. May God bless you. Thank you for coming into my kitchen. Thank you for hearing this podcast. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye.